The mirror of the antique dressing table reflects a face I can barely recognize as my own. Wrinkles line the once smooth skin like tree rings cut from a centuries-old oak tree. Marion Torquil, 68 years old, widow, mother, owner of a mansion in Castle Rock, and several accounts whose numbers would make many people whistle. Teresa, my mother, had always said that money didn't bring happiness, but made for comfortable unhappiness. How right she was. I comb my silvery hair with leisurely strokes. There's no hurry. The day stretches out before me like yesterday, and the day before that. It's been 2 years since Oswald left this world, leaving me in a huge house with ghosts of the past and memories that grow more blurred every day. Oswald Torquil was more than just my husband. He was my support, my compass. 43 years of marriage, 40 of which were happy. An investment banker with a sharp mind and a soft heart, he knew how to make money as easily as I baked blueberry muffins on Sundays. Our love story wasn't a story from a romantic movie. We met at a contemporary art show when I was 22 and he was 30. I was working at an art gallery and he had come to purchase something for his new office. Instead of a painting, he got my phone number and I got an invitation to dinner. The wedding, Rupert's birth, the move to Castle Rock, Oswald's career progression, my painting lessons for local children, our travels around the world. Life was full, fulfilling, and it seemed like it would always be that way. But a heart attack doesn't ask permission or inquire about your plans. One rainy April morning, Oswald just didn't wake up. The ringing of the phone pulls me out of my musings. Rupert's number. Good morning, Mom. His voice always sounds a little distant, as if he is talking to a stranger. Hello, darling, I answer, trying to put warmth into my voice. How are you? How's Winifred? I'm fine. Listen, Vinny and I were thinking maybe you should consider selling the house. It's too big for one person, and it costs a lot of money to maintain. There's some great apartments in the new senior citizen complex. It's always like this. No, how's it going? No, what's new? Straight to the point. My house and my money. Rupert, we've been over this. I don't want to sell the house. But it's unsustainable. It's my house, I said firmly, and I'm happy in it. He sighs. I can practically see him rolling his eyes, talking to an unreasonable child. Okay, suit yourself. Listen, we're in a bit of a financial bind. Winifred wants to update the kitchen, and I need to replace the car. I was wondering if you could. Of course I could. I always do. Since Oswald left, these requests have become a regular occurrence. At first they were infrequent and sounded embarrassed, but each time they became more and more insistent. I'll wire the money today, I replied, knowing I had no choice. If I refuse, the visits will become even less frequent and the conversations even colder. Thank you, Mom. We'll stop by your place this Saturday, okay? Vinny wants to show you a catalog of housing options. When the conversation ends, I feel empty. Rupert was so different as a child, an inquisitive, affectionate boy with his father's eyes and my smile. When did our relationship change? Maybe when he left for college, or when he met Winifred, a girl with ambitions beyond her talents. Or did it happen gradually, like aging, imperceptibly day by day, until one day you look in the mirror and see a completely different person? I pour myself some tea and go out into the backyard. The garden is my outlet, a place where I feel alive. Oswald understood my love of plants and created a paradise here, with a rose garden, an alpine slide, a lily pond. Now I take care of this little paradise myself, despite my arthritis, which makes my joints ache on rainy days. Noon finds me weeding the lavender beds. My thoughts flow leisurely, like the waters of a creek running along the edge of the property. I remember how Rupert loved to play in this garden as a child, how he used to build huts and search for treasure buried by Oswald. Then his eyes burned with delight and love. When did that fire go out, replaced by cold calculation? Everything changed after the wedding. Winifred Hollingsworth, a girl from a poor family with the ambitions of a socialite, saw my son as a ticket to a better life. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe she really does love him. It's just that our values are too different. But how do I explain the fact that every visit they make invariably boils down to talk about my will, about selling the house, about moving to a more suitable place? In the evening, sitting in an armchair with a book, I think back to the last family dinner. Rupert and Winifred arrived an hour late, she in a new dress, the cost of which could feed a small African village for a month. "Mom, you look tired," Rupert said instead of greeting her. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, quite well," I answered, though in truth insomnia had become my constant companion. "You know," interposed Winifred, fixing her perfect hair, "my aunt lived alone after her husband died. She suffered so much until she moved into a senior citizens complex. There's medical care close by, and companionship. I'm not alone," I objected. "I have friends. I have a book club. I take art classes. But that's not the same as constant care." Winifred gave me a smile that was supposed to be sympathetic, but looked like a predator's grin. "By the way, Mother," Rupert set his fork aside, "I wanted to talk to you about your will. Vinny and I have been thinking—" "Not now, Rupert," I interrupted him. "Let's enjoy our dinner." He frowned, glanced at his wife. All evening they talked about their problems. How hard it was to find a good housekeeper. The fact that their neighbors had bought a new car. That their vacation in the Maldives wasn't luxurious enough. Not one of them asked how I was coping in a huge house by myself, or inquired about my health or my mood. When they left, I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the ticking of the antique clock, a wedding gift from Oswald's parents. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a disembodied spirit whose presence is tolerated only because of my attachment to the material goods I can provide. The memories bring a heavy sigh. I close the book. The lines are still blurred before my eyes. It wasn't easy for me to accept the change in Rupert. The boy who once came to me with a broken knee and shared his dreams has turned into a calculating man whose visits always have a hidden agenda. And once upon a time, things were different. I remember Oswald spending hours with little Rupert, showing him how to cast a fishing rod, how to hammer nails, how to solve complex math problems. "He's going to be special," Oswald said, looking at his son with pride. "Smart, successful, but most importantly, decent." What happened to that boy? When did ambition supersede everything else? In college, Rupert studied economics and business management, aspiring to follow in his father's footsteps. Oswald was delighted with his choice, but often told me, "Rupert lacks flair. He is too attached to theory, does not see the people behind the numbers." At the time, I defended my son, saying that he was still young, that he would learn everything. Now I realize that Oswald saw what I refused to notice. Rupert met Winifred in his third year. She was studying marketing and had a reputation as a girl who always got her way. When they came to our house for Christmas, I noticed her evaluating our house, her eyes lingering on the antique furniture, the paintings, the collection of antique silver. But I convinced myself that it was just curiosity, admiration, a desire to get to know my future husband's family. Oswald was less optimistic. "She reminds me of a shark," he said after they left, "a beautiful, graceful, but ruthless predator who never stops." I dismissed his words, attributing them to my father's natural jealousy. Now I wish I'd listened. "Their wedding was lavish," insisted Winifred, although her parents could barely afford such expenses. Oswald silently paid most of the bills, saying only, "I hope she makes him happy." I remember the look in his eyes, sad, as if he had foreseen what would happen. After the wedding, Rupert got a job at an investment firm. Not as prestigious as Oswald's firm, but promising. They bought a house in the suburbs, got a dog, a golden retriever named Bailey. Everything looked perfect, like a picture in a magazine. Oswald and I visited them often, bringing gifts and helping to organize the house. Winifred was always friendly, but I could feel the falseness in her smile, the coldness behind the perfect facade. Things finally changed after Oswald's death. At the funeral, Rupert was by my side, supporting me, saying the right words. But within a week, there was talk about the will, about how I didn't need such a big house now, about how Dad would want you to be safe, looked after. I knew it wasn't care, but a desire to control the money and property I inherited. Deep down, I always knew that Oswald had left everything to me for a reason. He had foreseen what would happen after his death. "Be strong, Marion," he told me one day when we were discussing our will. "Don't let anyone push you around, not even Rupert. Especially Rupert. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. Now I do." The phone rings again. This time it's Theodosia Lambert, my longtime friend and lawyer. May, she's the only one who calls me by that abbreviated name. "How are you today?" The usual Theo. Rupert called about the money. "Again?" I don't hear surprise in her voice, but rather a confirmation of what I expected. "What is it this time?" "A kitchen for Winifred and a new car for him." "And you agreed?" Theodosia has always been straightforward. "What can I do? He's my only son, who only sees you as a source of finance," she sighs. "I'm sorry I spoke so harshly." "It's okay. I appreciate your honesty. To what do I owe the call?" "I just wanted to invite you to dinner Friday night. That new Italian restaurant I was telling you about." "I'd love to," I said. Theodosia is one of the few people who sees me not as a rich widow, but as a person with feelings, thoughts, history. Finished talking, I go out into the garden again. Evening is descending on Castle Rock, coloring the sky in shades of purple and gold. I sit down on the bench that Oswald made with his own hands on our 10th wedding anniversary. How many evenings we've spent here together, watching the sunset, making plans, dreaming of the future. A future that turned out to be very different than we had imagined. My thoughts go back to Rupert. I remember him, a 6-year-old boy sitting on this same bench with his feet dangling off the ground, telling me about his day at school. I remember when, at 12, he confided his first secret to me, that he had a crush on a girl in his class. I remember when he hugged me at 18 before he left for college, promising to call me every day. What happened to that boy? Maybe he never existed, but was just my illusion created by a mother's love? Or was he changed by Winifred, by money, by status? Or was he always like this, just better able to hide his true nature? The stars are beginning to show in the darkening sky. I remember Oswald teaching little Rupert how to find the constellations. "See, that's the Big Dipper," he would say, pointing to the sky. "And that's Polaris. It always points north, helps you stay on track." If only there were a star that could help me figure out how to get my son back, how to break through the wall of alienation that had grown between us. But maybe it's not the stars. Maybe it's me. Maybe I let him use me for too long, said yes too often when I should have said no. Maybe I created the monster with my own boundless generosity and forgiveness. Back to the house when it got too cool. A big, empty house where every room holds memories of the past. Sometimes I hear Oswald's footsteps in the hallway, his laughter from the kitchen, his voice calling my name. Sometimes I think I see little Rupert running up the stairs with a new toy in his hands. Ghosts of the past inhabit this house. making the loneliness less oppressive. I make myself a light dinner, soup and toast with cheese. Food has long since ceased to be a pleasure, becoming simply a necessity to sustain life. I eat at a small table in the kitchen, not in the dining room. There are too many empty chairs, the silence too loud. After dinner, I look over the bills that came in today. It does cost money to maintain the house, but I can afford it. Oswald left me more than enough funds. You should never need anything, he said as we discussed finances. Live the life you want. Don't skimp on yourself. I follow his advice, though most of my money goes to Rupert and Winifred. I take a hot bath before going to bed to relieve joint pain. The arthritis is progressing, though I try not to show Rupert. I'm afraid that any sign of weakness will be taken as a signal for him to take action, to talk about the nursing home, about the need for supervision. As I lie in bed, I think about the coming Saturday, about Rupert and Winifred's visit. I know they will talk again about selling the house, about moving, about the will. I know I will smile again, nod, promise to think about it, and change nothing. It's become our ritual, our game in which all the roles have long since been assigned. But something inside me is beginning to resist this scenario. A voice similar to Oswald's whispers, "Enough, Marion. It's time to stop this." Maybe he's right. Maybe it's time to stop being the comfortable, compliant, generous mom who would do anything for the phantom hope of her son's love. With these thoughts, I fall asleep, not knowing that the next few weeks will completely change my life in ways I could never have imagined. Saturday morning was overcast, with gray clouds that heralded rain. I watched them sitting by the window with a cup of tea in my hands. The water in the cup was cold, but I didn't take a sip. My thoughts were far away. Rupert and Winifred should arrive by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I could already feel the familiar tension gripping my shoulders. The doorbell rang at 2 sharp. Punctuality was the only trait my son had inherited from his father. I put down my unread book and went to answer the door. Dash, dash, mom, dash, exclamation mark. Rupert kissed me on the cheek, and I could smell the scent of expensive cologne. "How are you?" "Fine, darling." I tried to smile. "Come in, I've made tea." Winifred floated into the hall, elegant as ever. Her impeccable appearance always made me uncomfortable. I looked like a slovenly old woman in my simple house dress. "Marion," she hugged me, barely touching me, as if she was afraid of getting dirty. "Have you lost weight?" Her voice sounded less like concern and more like clinical observation. I shrugged. "Maybe. My appetite's not what it used to be." They glanced at each other, and I saw something in that look. Unsettling. It was as if my health were of special interest to them. In the living room, Winifred immediately pulled a glossy booklet out of her bag. "We found the perfect place, Marion. Sun Valley is a luxury retirement community. It has everything: 24-hour medical care, social activities, beautiful grounds for walking, and excellent security," Rupert added, watching my reaction. "Why would I need security?" I asked, pouring the tea. "Castle Rock is peaceful." "Mom, you live alone in a big house. Anything can happen," Rupert said in the tone one would use with a cranky child. "A broken hip, a fall in the bathtub, a heart attack. None of those things have happened to me yet." I tried to stay calm. "And since when did you become such a freak anyway?" "Since you became forgetful," he said sharply. "Forgetful?" I was genuinely surprised. "Last time you couldn't remember where you'd put your car keys," Winifred interjected, "and then we found them in the refrigerator." I frowned. "I don't remember that happening. Sure, sometimes I forget little things, but who doesn't? It's not a sign of senile dementia." "Age takes its toll, Marion," Winifred continued, tilting her head slightly to the side. There's no shame in admitting that you need help. I don't need help. I was getting annoyed. I'm doing fine on my own. What about those pills you forgot to take last Thursday? Rupert looked at me with such reproachful eyes that I felt a pang of guilt, even though I was sure I was taking my medication on schedule. What kind of pills? Blood pressure? He sighed. See, you don't even remember. Mom, it's dangerous. I was silent, trying to remember. Had I really forgotten? But I always put the pills in a special container with compartments for each day of the week. Doubt crept into my soul, and that was what scared me the most. Anyway, Rupert changed his tone to businesslike. We've already found out how much it costs to move to Sun Valley and how much we can get for this house. The difference will be substantial, enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. And there will be some left over, Winifred added with a smile that didn't affect her eyes. I'm not selling the house, I said firmly, and I'm not moving anywhere. The subject is closed. There was that look between them again, a silent exchange of information from which I was excluded. Okay, Mom, Rupert agreed with sudden ease. Let's not push it. Just think about it, okay? The rest of the visit was spent in strained conversations about the weather, politics, and mutual acquaintances. When they finally left, I felt so relieved, like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That evening of the same day, I discovered the first oddity. My blood pressure pills, I always keep them in the bathroom, in the cabinet above the sink, were in the kitchen, next to the kettle. I distinctly remembered not bringing them in there. Maybe I took them out in the morning and forgot to put them back, but I never take my meds in the kitchen. The next day, I caught myself checking and rechecking where I put things. Keys on the hook by the door, glasses on the bedside table, pills, strictly in a container with compartments. I even started making notes in my notebook, recording what I left where. A week after Rupert's visit, I woke up with a bad headache and dizziness. Strange. I had felt fine the day before. Perhaps a change in the weather? I'd been getting more sensitive to pressure lately. After taking a pill for the headache, I struggled to get out of bed. My legs felt like cotton balls, and my eyes were blurry. I struggled to the bathroom and almost fell on a stool in front of the mirror. My reflection frightened me. A pale face, dilated pupils. What was happening to me? On the third try, I managed to dial Theodosia's number. Her voice, always crisp and clear, came out as if through absorbent cotton. May, what's wrong? You sound strange. I don't know. I don't feel well. Can you come over? I'll come right away. Should I call an ambulance? No, just come. Theodosia arrived 20 minutes later. She lived at the other end of Castle Rock. By then I was feeling a little better, but I was still dizzy and nauseous. Oh my God, May, she exclaimed when she saw me. You look awful. Thanks for the compliment, I smiled weakly. What happened? I don't know. I woke up like this. Theodosia helped me to the kitchen, made tea, made me drink a glass of water. Did you drink last night? She asked, looking me carefully in the eye. What? No, of course not. A glass of wine at dinner, no more. That's odd. She frowned. The symptoms look like intoxication or the effects of a strong sedative. I don't take anything like that. What about your regular meds? Just blood pressure, as usual. Theodosia thought for a moment, tapping her fingers on the table. Where are your pills? I pointed to a container on the kitchen table. That's odd, I mumbled. I usually keep them in the bathroom. Theodosia took the container and opened several compartments, examining the pills. Do they look normal? Yeah, I guess so. I squinted, trying to focus my eyes. Although, is it just me, or are they a little larger than usual? Theodosia took a magnifying glass out of her bag. She always carried it with her, a professional habit of a lawyer who often worked with the small print of contracts, and examined the pills carefully. May, she said slowly, these pills look strange. It's like they've been opened and something's been added. What? I couldn't believe my ears. But who? We looked at each other, and I saw in Theodosia's eyes the same horror I felt. No, I shook my head. It's impossible. Rupert would never. May. Theodosia took my hand. I don't want to frighten you, but let's consider the facts. Your son and his wife are persistently suggesting that you sell the house and move into a nursing home. They keep talking about your forgetfulness, even though I don't notice any signs of dementia. Your medications are out of place, and now you're waking up in a state of what looks like intoxication. It could be a coincidence, I objected weakly. Maybe. Theodosia nodded. Maybe not. Have you ever left them alone in the house? I wondered. Indeed, a couple of times I had gone out into the garden during their visits, leaving them in the parlor. And last Saturday, Winifred asked to go to the bathroom. Oh my God, I whispered. Could it be? I'm not saying anything for sure, Theodosia said quickly. But it's better to be on the safe side. Let's make sure you don't take those pills anymore. I'll take you to the doctor and he'll prescribe new ones, and keep them in a place no one knows about. I nodded, still unable to believe that my own son could. No, it was unthinkable. There had to be another explanation. 3 days later, when I stopped taking the pills from the container and started taking the new ones prescribed by Dr. Pearson, my condition improved dramatically. The dizziness stopped. The mental clarity returned. It could have been a coincidence. Perhaps I'd just had a temporary spike in my blood pressure, but doubt had already settled in my heart. Theodosia insisted that I be extra careful. I began locking my bedroom at night, hiding new medications in a secret stash that only I knew about, and keeping a diary of how I was feeling. On Rupert and Winifred's next visit, I watched them carefully, trying to catch hints of their true intentions. They seemed concerned about my appearance. I did look better than usual. Did you change your face cream, Mom? Winifred asked with mild bewilderment. You look younger. Just a good night's sleep, I replied with a smile. Rupert frowned at me. How's your blood pressure? Do you take your pills regularly? Of course, darling. I'm very responsible about my health. They exchanged those strange looks again, and this time I was sure they were disappointed. Later, when I went into the kitchen to make fresh tea, Winifred followed me, offering to help. I deliberately left the now empty pill container in plain sight. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed how she, thinking I couldn't see, quickly opened it, checked the contents, and then just as quickly closed it. Do you need help with the tea? She asked with fake concern. No thanks, I'm fine, I replied, feeling a chill run down my spine. The evening after they left, I called Theodosia. You were right, I said without preamble. They're doing something to my medication. Are you sure? Positive? Winifred was checking my pill container today, thinking I couldn't see. May, this is serious. If they're really putting something in your medication, it could be life-threatening. I know, I swallowed the lump in my throat. But why would they do that? I think we both know the answer, Theodosia said quietly. They want you to look like you can't take care of yourself, so they have an excuse to put you in foster care, to get control of your finances, to sell the house. Or worse, the words came out before I could think about them. There was a heavy silence. Yes, Theodosia said finally. Or worse, May, you need to be very careful. Don't eat or drink anything they bring. Don't leave them alone in the house. And for God's sake, don't sign any papers. Don't worry, I'll be careful. After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a long time, looking out the window at the moonlight silvering my garden. The garden that Oswald had created for me, where we spent summer evenings together, where little Rupert played and laughed. How did we get to this point? How could my son, flesh of my flesh, turn into a man capable of harming his own mother? Perhaps it was the money, or Winifred and her insatiable ambition, or myself. Perhaps I had been too soft, too generous, allowed him too much. Oswald always said that I was spoiling the boy, that he should earn his own living, know the value of money. But I didn't listen. I wanted Rupert to have the best of everything, that he never needed anything. And the result is a son who sees me as an obstacle to wealth, an obstacle to be removed. The next morning, I began to notice other oddities. My favorite brooch, which I always kept in a jewelry box on my dressing table, was in my dresser drawer. The car keys I always hung on the hook by the door were in the pocket of a coat I hadn't worn in a week. Little things that could be chalked up to forgetfulness, if I were really forgetful. But I knew I hadn't forgotten where I'd put those things. Someone was deliberately moving them around to make me question my sanity. Gaslighting is what they call it now. I'd read about it in psychological novels, but I never thought I'd be a victim of such a thing. In the evening, going through my financial records, I did this regularly now, for fear that Rupert might have access to my accounts. I discovered another oddity. Small amounts, 500, 700, $1,000, had been withdrawn from my account regularly over the past 3 months. I was sure I hadn't withdrawn this money. Could Rupert have accessed my card? But how? I remembered that I had given him my card several times when he offered to go grocery shopping. Could he have written down the number, the code, made a copy? The thought made me physically sick. The next morning, I called the bank and blocked the card, explaining that I had lost it. Then I withdrew a large sum of cash and hid it in my home safe, the combination to which only I knew. Now, at least Rupert wouldn't be able to steal my money. But financial fraud was the least of my problems. If Rupert and Winifred really were putting something in my medication, they could seriously damage my health or even— No, I couldn't even mentally say that word. I couldn't believe my son was capable of such a thing. There had to be another explanation. But as the days passed, the evidence grew. One evening, going through the mail, I found a letter from Sun Valley, the same upscale retirement community that Rupert and Winifred had talked about. It was addressed to my son, but it had gotten into my mailbox by mistake. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a tentative contract for the placement of Mrs. Marion Torquil in the dementia unit. The contract was signed in my name, an obvious forgery, but similar enough to fool the township staff. Under person in charge was Rupert's name. They planned to put me in a nursing home against my will, declaring me incompetent. Maybe that's why they were putting something in my medication, to make me really look inadequate. I sat there, letter in hand, and felt the world crumbling around me. My son, my only child, was planning to put me in an institution to take over my money and property. It was unbearable. My first impulse was to call Rupert and tell him what I thought. But Theodosia had taught me, never show your adversary that you have discovered his plan. Better to let him think you suspect nothing while you prepare a counterstrike. Instead, I called her and told her about my find. It's not just a suspicion anymore, Theo. I have proof they're planning to declare me incompetent and lock me up in a clinic. Keep that letter, Theodosia said firmly. It might come in handy if it goes to trial. A trial? I was shocked. Did you think it would go that far? May, she sounded sympathetic, mixed with concern. I think we need to be prepared for the worst. If they're willing to manipulate your medication and forge your signature, who knows what else they're capable of? I remained silent, unable to accept the terrible truth. My son wanted to get rid of me. Not physically, perhaps, although that was possible, but out of his life, with all my money. What should I do, Theo? I finally asked. Well, for starters, secure yourself. Change the locks, install security cameras. I can recommend a good company. They'll do it quickly and professionally. And then we'll change your will. But most importantly, we need to gather evidence of their manipulation. Without that, they might just challenge the new will, claiming you were incapacitated when you made it. I sighed, feeling immensely tired. Why is it so complicated, Theo? Why is my own son? I don't know, May, she said quietly. Sometimes the people closest to you are the cruelest, but I promise I won't leave you. We'll get through this together. I sat at the window for a long time after my conversation with Theodosia, looking out at my garden in the twilight. A strange calmness came over me, the calmness of a man who had finally seen the truth, however bitter it might be. Rupert and Winifred weren't just greedy and unfeeling, they were dangerous, and I had to protect myself. As I made that decision, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Now that I knew what I was dealing with, I could act, and I would act decisively, because not only was my freedom at stake, but possibly my life. It had been a week since I discovered the letter from Sun Valley, a week filled with anxiety and sleepless nights. I'd changed the locks, installed hidden surveillance cameras in the main rooms of the house, and created a new stash of medication in the pocket of Oswald's old robe, which for obvious reasons would never interest Rupert or Winifred. Theodosia proved to be an invaluable support. She came almost every day, helped with the paperwork, and reviewed the camera tapes with me. So far, fortunately, to no avail. Rupert and Winifred had not come in my absence. We even drew up a tentative plan of action in case my fears were finally confirmed. That morning I felt particularly tired. The rain drummed on the roof. The sky was covered with gray clouds, and my old joints ached more than usual. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping tea and leafing through the morning paper, when my cell phone rang. Rupert's name popped up on the screen, and I felt the familiar prick of anxiety. "Good morning, darling," I answered, trying to keep my voice light-hearted. Silence, then some rustling, muffled voices. "Rupert, can you hear me?" Silence again. Must have been an accidental call. I pressed the button in my pocket without noticing. I was about to hang up when I heard my son's voice. He wasn't talking to me, apparently not realizing the call had connected. "Another week tops, Vinny. I've arranged with Dr. Harrison. He'll sign the necessary papers. The clinic's ready for her now, just waiting for the meds to kick in for real." My heart skipped a beat. I gripped the phone tighter, holding my breath. What if she suspects something? Winifred's voice sounded concerned. Lately, she seemed a little too normal lately. "Don't worry," Rupert grinned, and the sound sent a chill down my spine. I upped the dose. A couple more days, and this useless old woman would go to her final sleep, and you and I will enjoy her money in Madrid. Have you chosen a hotel yet? "I'm thinking of the Ritz," Winifred said with anticipation, "the most luxurious room overlooking the square." "Great," Rupert sounded pleased. "Deserve the best after all these years of waiting. By the way, did you check her jewelry box? Is the diamond necklace in there?" "Yeah, but I couldn't get it. She's home all the time. But don't worry, it'll all be ours soon, legally and officially." "Yes." The sun laughed, and that laughter, once so dear, now sounded like the scraping of metal on glass. "True, at first you will have to endure the funeral, pretend to grieve. But it was a small price to pay for freedom and wealth." The phone slipped from my suddenly weakened fingers and fell to the table with a thud. The teacup tipped over, dark liquid spilling over the newspaper, but I didn't notice. Black dots floated in front of my eyes, and my ears were buzzing. My son, my only child, planned my death. Not just to get rid of me by putting me in a clinic. No, he wanted me dead. A wave of nausea came up to my throat. I barely made it to the sink before I threw up. Tears streamed down my face, my knees buckling. I sank to the floor, pressing my palms against the cold tiles, trying to breathe. This couldn't be true. I must have misheard. Or it's some kind of monstrous joke. Or a dream. Yes, perhaps I'm still dreaming, and this nightmare will soon be over. But the phone on the table continued to carry the voices of Rupert and Winifred. They were discussing the details of the trip to Spain, laughing, making plans for the future, a future in which there was no room for me because I was supposed to be dead. I don't know how much time I spent on the kitchen floor trying to comprehend what I'd heard. Minutes? Hours? Suddenly, I realized that there was silence in the house. The bell must have been interrupted. And in that silence, I began to regain my composure. Rupert, my son, has betrayed me in the worst possible way. But I will not sit and wait to die. I will fight. With trembling hands, I dialed Theodosia's number. Theo, my voice was hoarse, barely recognizable. You must come, immediately. May, what's wrong? She sensed something wrong right away. Just come. Bring a tape recorder. We need to record everything. She didn't ask any questions, just said, I'll be there in 15 minutes. As I waited for Theodosia, my mind whirled. Memories of Rupert the child, his first steps, his first word, Mommy, his laughter when I tickled him, his tears when he fell off his bike, his pride when he got his first A. How could this loving boy turn into a monster willing to kill his own mother for money? Maybe he never existed, that loving boy. Maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Or was it Winifred's fault, poisoning his soul with her greed? Or was it my fault that I spoiled him too much, gave him too much without asking for anything in return? Theodosia arrived even sooner than she had promised. One look at my face was enough for her to know that something terrible had happened. May, for God's sake, what happened? I silently pointed to the phone. Rupert had accidentally called me. I heard them talking to Winifred. My throat constricted. I couldn't say it out loud. They what? Theodosia sat down next to me, taking my hand. They're planning to kill me. The words finally came out, and with them a flood of tears. Rupert is putting something in my medication. He said that soon the useless old lady will go to her last sleep, and then they're going to spend my money in Madrid. Theodosia's face petrified. A cold glint appeared in her eyes that I had seen only once before, when she was in court against a man who had defrauded dozens of pensioners. Did you record the conversation? No, I didn't guess. I was in shock. It doesn't matter. She squeezed my fingers. We already have enough evidence. The letter from Sun Valley, the surveillance cameras, your pills, and now we have motive. What do I do, Theo? I felt lost, crushed. Put our plan in motion, she said firmly. Remember when we discussed the possibility of this scenario? Now we have no doubts. Yes, we did discuss it. When suspicions first arose, Theodosia insisted on developing a defense strategy. I hope we never have to use it, she said then, but it's better to be prepared for the worst. Theodosia helped me up off the floor, sat me down at the table, and poured fresh tea. The first thing we must do, she said, opening her briefcase, is to record your testimony. I'll write down your account of the call, the suspicious pills, everything that's happened in the last few weeks. I nodded, wiping away my tears. And then we'll change your will, immediately. And not just change it, we'll create an unassailable legal barrier between Rupert and your money. A trust managed by independent trustees with strict conditions. Even if something happens to you, he won't get a dime. It sounded reasonable, but the thought of Rupert continued to tear at my heart. What if? I hesitated, unable to voice my fear. What if they try to act faster? What if they realize I know something? Theodosia looked me straight in the eye. We won't give them that chance. Tonight you will move in with me. My house is alarmed. I have guards. You'll be safe while we deal with this case. What about my house, my stuff? Trusted people will gather what you need, and the house. She's been thinking. Perhaps we should temporarily hire a guard. In case Rupert tries to break in while you're away. Theodosia's plan was logical, well thought out, but to carry it out was to admit the terrible truth. My son was my enemy, an enemy willing to kill. Put our plan into action, I said at last, feeling my resolve supplant my pain and fear. I will no longer be a victim. Theodosia nodded with approval. That's the spirit, May. Now let's write everything down in detail. And the drugs, we have to get them to forensics so we know exactly what he was poisoning you with. We spent the next few hours documenting all the suspicious events of the last few weeks. I described the strange arrangement of things, the pills, the dizziness and memory lapses, the letter from the clinic. Theodosia meticulously recorded every detail, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Good, she said, closing the notebook. Now we need to act quickly. I'll call my friend in the police to recommend a reliable lab to analyze the drugs. Then we'll go to the notary. I've already drafted a new will. I just need your approval and signature. What about Rupert? I asked. What are we going to tell him? Nothing yet, Theodosia replied firmly. Let him think his plan is working. It will give us time to gather all the evidence and build a defense. What if he calls or comes? If he calls, say the usual. Tell him you're not feeling well, that you're on medication, that everything's going according to plan. If he comes, the same thing. But don't be alone with him and don't eat or drink anything he suggests. The plan was good, but the thought of pretending to be in front of my son made me cringe. How would I be able to look him in the eye, knowing he wanted me dead? How could I smile, nod, make small talk? I'm not sure I can do it, I admitted. I'm not sure I can fake it. You won't have to do it for long, Theodosia assured me. A few days at the most, until we've completed the legal formalities, and then we'll strike back. I could see the steely determination in her eyes. Theodosia had always been a fighter, never backing down in the face of adversity. And now, looking at her, I could feel some of that determination transferring to me. All right, I nodded. I'll do whatever it takes. Good. She smiled and squeezed my hand. Now pack the essentials. You're moving in with me tonight. As I put my clothes and toiletries into a small bag, my thoughts went back to Rupert. The Rupert I'd known, or thought I'd known, his whole life. The boy who'd brought me flowers from the neighbor's flower bed, for which he'd been scolded by Oswald. To the teenager who helped me prepare a surprise birthday party for my father. To the young man who cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend dumped him. Was that Rupert the real Rupert? Or was it always a mask behind which lurked a calculating cold man capable of planning the murder of his own mother? I pulled a framed photograph out of the dresser. Rupert in his senior year of high school, smiling, happy, with a sparkle in his eyes that was now completely gone. I ran my finger over his face, feeling my heart clench with pain. What happened to you, son? I whispered. When did you become like this? Tears came to my eyes again, but I wiped them away with determination. Now was not the time for weakness. Now was the time for action. I put the picture back in the dresser and closed the drawer, a symbolic gesture, closing the past, preparing for the future, a future in which I would have to defend myself against my own son. When I returned to the kitchen, Theodosia had already finished her phone call and was writing something down in her notebook. Everything is ready, she said. My friend in the police force recommended a reliable laboratory. They'll analyze your pills today, and tomorrow morning we're meeting with a notary. Thank you, Theo. I put my bag on the floor. I don't know what I would have done without you. You'd be fine, she said firmly. You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad I can help. At that moment, my phone rang. Rupert's name on the screen made me wince. It's him, I whispered, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Answer it. Theodosia nodded. Speak as usual. You're not feeling well, but you're taking your medication. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. Hello, Rupert. Mom, how are you? His voice sounded concerned, but now I knew it was fake concern. Not very well. I tried to keep my voice low, tired. I feel dizzy and weak. Oh, I caught a note of satisfaction in his tone. Do you take your medication regularly? Yes, of course, I lied. Dr. Harrison said it would help. Theodosia nodded approvingly. I'd mentioned the doctor's name correctly, the one Rupert had mentioned in the overheard conversation. Great, Rupert said. Vinny and I were going to stop by tomorrow to check on you. Maybe we could bring something good to eat. Poisoned, I thought, but I said out loud, Thanks, but I don't eat much. No appetite at all. Too bad. He couldn't hide his disappointment. Well, we'll stop by anyway. Around 3, okay? Okay, I forced myself to add. I'd love to see you. When the conversation was over, I threw the phone on the table as if it were burning my hand. They want to come tomorrow, I said to Theodosia. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Great, she nodded. We'll have changed the will by then we'll surprise them tonight. Surprise? Yes. Theodosia's eyes had a dangerous glint in them. I think it's time to show Rupert that he's lost the game. I wasn't sure I was ready for such a confrontation, but I understood the need for decisive action. Rupert and Winifred had gone too far. They were planning my death, and they had to answer for it. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Theodosia began to gather her things. Now we have to go. The sooner we get out of here, the better. I glanced around the kitchen, the living room visible through the archway, the house where most of my life had been spent. A house full of memories, happy and sad. A house that my son wanted to take away from me, along with my life. I'm ready, I said, picking up my bag. As I left the house, I didn't look back. I looked only ahead to where the unknown awaited, but also the hope of justice. Put our plan into action, I repeated, getting into Theodosia's car. No more hesitation. She nodded, starting the engine. No more hesitation. Now we fight. Theodosia's house was exactly as I'd imagined it. Modern, functional, yet cozy. Large windows, minimalist furniture, shelves of legal literature. No unnecessary things. No junk. Everything had its place and purpose, just as it had in Theodosia's own life. Make yourself comfortable, she said, showing me to the guest bedroom. Bathrooms through the door on the right, towels in the closet. Make yourself at home. I set my bag on the bed and looked around. The room was decorated in calm beige colors, with a neatly made bed and a small desk by the window. Nothing superfluous, but everything necessary. Thank you, Theo, I turned to her, for everything. You're welcome, she smiled slightly. You would have done the same for me. It was true. Our friendship, which had begun years ago when Theodosia had helped Oswald with some legal matters, had stood the test of time and distance. She had been my support after my husband's death, and now, at the most difficult moment of my life, she stood by me again. I'll cook dinner, Theodosia said. You rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day. When I was alone, I unpacked and sat on the bed. The fatigue came on suddenly, as if all the events of the day had fallen on my shoulders at once. I lay down without even undressing and almost instantly fell into a heavy sleep. I awoke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee. The sunlight was streaming through the blinds, creating a striped pattern on the floor. For a moment, I forgot where I was and why, but then the memories came back, bringing with them pain and anxiety. Theodosia was already sitting at the kitchen table, looking through some papers. In front of her was a cup of coffee and a plate of toast. "Good morning," she said when I entered. "How did you sleep?" "Mom, better than I expected," I admitted. "What are these papers?" "A draft of your new will." She slid the stack toward me. "Read it while you're having breakfast. If you have any questions or objections, let me know." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down, beginning to look through the documents. The will was well written and detailed. The bulk of my estate was going to a trust managed by 3 independent trustees, Theodosia and 2 other lawyers I didn't know. The trust was to support several charities, including a homeless animal shelter that I had supported for many years, and an educational program for underprivileged children. Rupert was left a token amount of $1, with a clear indication that it was not a mistake, but a conscious decision made in his right mind and good judgment. That's, that's harsh," I said when I reached the end. "It's necessary," Theodosia said firmly. "If we leave him anything substantial, he'll find a way to contest the will. This way, he wouldn't have a chance." I nodded, understanding her logic, but still feeling a stab of pain. No matter how awful Rupert had been, he was still my son. And cutting him out of the will completely was harder than I'd thought. "There's one more thing." Theodosia pulled another document out of the folder. "It's a statement to the police about the attempted poisoning. I've prepared a draft, but we'll file it only after we get the results of the analysis of your medication." I ran my eyes over the text of the statement. The cold, legally precise wording described what I'd experienced over the past weeks: the suspicious behavior of Rupert and Winifred, the manipulation of my medication, the overheard conversation about my planned death. Seeing it all put on paper in official language was strange, as if it were about someone else, not me. "Are you ready to sign both documents?" Theodosia asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm ready." "Good," she nodded. "We're meeting with the notary at 10 o'clock. He'll come to my house." I explained the situation and he agreed. "He won't question my sanity?" I asked anxiously. "Because if Rupert tries to contest the will—" "Don't worry." Theodosia smiled. "The notary is an old friend and colleague of mine. He will bring an independent medical expert with him who will confirm your capacity. Everything will be according to the law, so Rupert won't be able to pick on you." At 10 o'clock, as promised, the notary, an elderly man with a neat gray beard, and the doctor, a middle-aged woman with an attentive gaze, arrived. They asked me a few questions, testing my orientation in time and space, my memory, my ability to reason logically. I passed this mini-examination without difficulty. "Mrs. Torquil is fully capable," the doctor concluded, writing something down in her notebook. "I don't see any signs of cognitive impairment." The notary nodded, clearly satisfied. "In that case, let's start signing the documents." I signed each page of the will, feeling a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. On the one hand, I was protecting myself and my estate from a man who wanted me dead. On the other hand, that man was my son, and each signature was like a stabbing blow to our relationship, which was already hanging by a thread. When all the formalities were completed, the notary and the doctor left, and Theodosia and I were left alone. "Well, the first step has been taken," she said, gathering the documents. "Now, no matter what happens, Rupert won't get your money." "What's next?" I asked. "Next, we collect evidence." Theodosia pulled a business card from a desk drawer. "These are the contacts of Edgar Finch, the best private investigator in the state. I've already talked to him, and he's ready to take the case." "A private investigator?" I was surprised. "Why? We need hard evidence that Rupert and Winifred were planning your murder. An overheard conversation is good, but it's not enough. We need more. Bank statements showing they'd already spent your money without your knowledge, CCTV footage, maybe witness statements. And Edgar can get all that? If anyone can, it's him, Theodosia said confidently. I've known him for years. He's worked for my clients on some of the toughest cases. Legally, of course, she added quickly, noticing my expression. I nodded, trusting her judgment. Good. When are we meeting him? He'll be here at 2. Theodosia glanced at her watch. Until then, we have one more important thing to do. We need to install additional security cameras in your house before Rupert and Winifred visit. But there are already cameras there, I reminded her. Yes, but they only cover the main rooms. We need more, especially in the kitchen and bathroom where your medication is kept. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we were already at my house. Theodosia had brought a small suitcase with miniature cameras, so small they could be hidden almost anywhere. These transmit a signal directly to my phone, she explained, setting one of the cameras on the kitchen shelf, pointing it at the countertop where my medicine container usually stood. That way we can watch everything in real time. We set up cameras in strategic places: the kitchen, the bathroom, my bedroom, my office. We paid special attention to the places where I used to keep valuables, documents, and medications. Now we need to create a believable environment, Theodosia said, looking around the kitchen. Rupert and Winifred have to believe that you're living here as usual and don't suspect a thing. We scattered a few things around, giving the impression of a settled space: a cup of unfinished tea on the table, an open book on the couch, a plaid thrown carelessly on a chair. I pulled some old blood pressure pills out of the medicine cabinet, the same ones we suspected were poisoned, and set the container in a prominent place in the kitchen. They must think you're still taking them, Theodosia explained. It will give them a false sense of security. At 2 o'clock, as promised, Edgar Finch arrived, a short, unassuming, middle-aged man, easily overlooked in the crowd. But his eyes, sharp and attentive, were the mark of a professional, accustomed to noticing what others missed. Mrs. Torquil. He shook my hand. Ms. Lambert told me about your situation. I'm sorry for your loss. No one should have to go through something like that, especially from their own children. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. Do you think you can help? I'm sure I can, he smiled, but his eyes remained serious. I've already started a preliminary investigation. Rupert Torquil, 38, middle manager at Greenfield Partners, an investment firm. Married to Winifred Hollingsworth, 36, former model, now a housewife. They live in the suburbs. Bought the house 5 years ago with your financial help. Is that correct? I was impressed with his knowledge. Yes, that's correct. They've had a lot of credit card activity in recent months, Edgar continued. Expensive restaurants, boutiques, jewelry stores. They've also recently put down a deposit to reserve a room at the Ritz Hotel in Madrid for next month. Madrid, I shuddered, remembering the overheard conversation. They were actually planning to go there after I died. That's right, Edgar nodded. And by the looks of it, they've already started spending your money. I checked your bank statements, and there were small withdrawals from your account on a regular basis. Small enough not to arouse suspicion, but it adds up to a fair amount. I discovered it a few days ago, I said. I blocked the card. You did the right thing, the detective approved. But they'd already withdrawn about $30,000 in the last 3 months. Theodosia, who was listening to the conversation, shook her head. That's financial fraud, May. We can sue them on that basis alone. But that's not the point, I argued. The main thing is to prove that they were planning to, I stammered, still unable to say the word murder in the context of my son. Of course, Edgar agreed. And for that, we need more evidence. Surveillance footage, drug analysis, witness testimony. I've already started working in that direction. What exactly are you doing? I asked with curiosity. Watching their house, tracking their movements, checking contacts. He shrugged, as if it were the most common thing to do. Winifred, for example, meets regularly with a man named Robert Harrison. Did that name sound familiar? Dr. Harrison? I exclaimed. Rupert had mentioned him in the conversation I had overheard. He said he had arranged some papers with him. Exactly, Edgar nodded. Minus Dr. Robert Harrison, a therapist of less than sterling reputation. He'd been involved in some dubious stories involving the wills of elderly patients. Nothing was ever proven, but there's no smoke without fire. They wanted him to certify my incapacity. I was beginning to realize the extent of the conspiracy. To have legal grounds to put me in a nursing home, and then, presumably, to hasten your departure with the same drugs they'd already tried to poison you with, Edgar added. A classic scheme. Theodosia glanced at her watch. It was almost 3. Rupert and Winifred should be here soon. May, do you remember what to do? I nodded, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Pretend to be weak and sick, saying I take my medication regularly, not show that I suspect anything. Exactly. She squeezed my hand. Edgar and I will be watching through the cameras. If anything goes wrong, we'll intervene immediately. They left out the back door so their cars wouldn't be visible from the street. I was left alone in a house that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. Knowing that my every move was being watched by hidden cameras, I felt like an actress on stage, and this was the most important role of my life. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, reminded myself of the role I had to play, and went to open it. Rupert and Winifred stood on the doorstep, both dressed as if they were going to a social gathering rather than to their elderly mother's house. He in a perfectly pressed shirt and expensive pants. She in a dress that must have cost more than the average American's monthly pension. Dash, dash, Mom. Rupert stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me. I forced myself not to recoil from the embrace, which now felt false and dangerous. How are you feeling? Not so good. I deliberately made my voice weak and shaky. I'm dizzy, and I keep wanting to sleep. It's the medication, he said with ill-concealed satisfaction. It takes time for the body to adjust. You take them regularly, don't you? Of course, I nodded, inviting them inside. Just like Dr. Harrison said. They looked at each other, and I saw in their eyes the same satisfaction I'd seen before. They thought their plan was working. We walked to the kitchen where I started making tea, deliberately making my movements slow and uncertain, as if I was having trouble concentrating. Mom, are you sure you're up to this? Rupert asked with fake concern. Let me help you. No, I'll do it. I smiled weakly. I just need a little more time than usual. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Winifred, thinking I couldn't see, cast a quick glance at the container of pills on the table. A faint smile touched her lips. Marion, we spoke to Dr. Harrison, she said as we sat down at the tea table. He's very concerned about your condition. He says you need constant supervision. Really? I pretended to be surprised and concerned. But I didn't think it was that serious. Unfortunately, it was. Rupert put his hand on mine, and it was hard not to pull it away. That's why we want to talk about Sun Valley again. You'll be taken care of by professionals there. I don't know, darling. I shook my head in doubt. I'm so used to this house. A house is just walls, Mom. He smiled the smile I'd once found charming, but now I saw only falseness in it. What matters is your health and well-being. And your bank account, I thought, but said out loud, maybe you're right. I've been so tired lately. And these memory lapses? Memory lapses? Winifred stepped forward, unable to hide her interest. What kind of blackouts? Well, for instance, I paused as if trying to remember. I put my glasses down yesterday, somewhere, and I couldn't find them for an hour. And I couldn't find them for an hour. Then I found them in the refrigerator. Weird, isn't it? They exchanged glances again, now openly triumphant. It happens, Mom, Rupert said in a soothing tone. It's nothing to worry about, but that's why you need supervision. I guess, I sighed. I'll think about it. I really would. The visit lasted about an hour. The whole time I was playing the part of a weakening, memory-impaired woman who was beginning to realize that she needed help. Rupert and Winifred were clearly pleased with my condition, increasingly relaxed and no longer hiding their satisfaction. As they were about to leave, Rupert suddenly remembered. Oh, yes, Mother. I forgot to ask you. Where's your credit card? You said on the phone that you'd lost it. Yes, I nodded. I can't find it. I must have dropped it at the store. Did you block it? I could see the worry in his eyes. Not yet. I shook my head, acting absent-minded. I keep forgetting to call the bank. I'll do it for you, he said quickly. Just give me the card details and your password. This is it, I thought. This is the proof Edgar is looking for. Rupert is trying to access my accounts. I think the data is written in my little black book, I said. It's in my office, in the top drawer of my desk. Could you look in it while I saw Winifred off? He readily agreed, and I walked Winifred to the door, deliberately slowly, giving Rupert time. I knew the camera in the office was recording his every move. When we finally said goodbye and they left, I collapsed into my chair, feeling wrung out like a lemon. Playing this role was much harder than I thought it would be. Theodosia and Edgar returned a few minutes later, both of them bright-eyed. You were great, May, Theodosia said, hugging me. Just great. We got everything we needed, Edgar added, showing me the screen of his tablet. Dash watch. On the screen was the footage from the camera in the study. Rupert was quickly going through the contents of his desk drawers, obviously looking for more than just his notebook. He checked all the documents he could find, took pictures of a few of them on his phone, and then opened a small safe hidden in the bottom drawer, which I had never given him the code to. From the safe, he pulled out a wad of cash and looked around and quickly slipped it into his pocket. That's proof of the theft, Edgar said with satisfaction. And here's something else interesting. He switched to the tape from the kitchen. Winifred, alone for a moment, I had gone out to get Rupert, quickly opened the container of pills, took out a few, replaced them with others she'd taken from her purse, and closed the container, putting it back in place. This is it, I whispered, feeling a chill run down my spine. They really are putting something in my medication. We have all the evidence now, Theodosia said. The theft, the manipulation of the medication, the attempt to gain control of your finances. That's enough to charge you with attempted murder. So what now? I asked, feeling a strange emptiness inside. I should be feeling triumph, but instead I felt only fatigue and sadness. Now we finalize the evidence, Edgar answered. I'll have the pills Winifred planted analyzed. I'll also check their contacts with Dr. Harrison, look for witnesses to their conversations, and then we'll turn everything over to the police. And they'll be arrested? I still couldn't believe it had come to this. Probably, yes. Theodosia nodded. May, I understand how hard this is for you. He's your son, but he crossed the line. He wanted to kill you. I knew she was right. Rupert and Winifred planned my death for money. They methodically poisoned me, stole my savings, prepared to declare me incompetent. They deserved to be punished. But part of me still remembered the little boy with his father's eyes, running to me with a shattered knee. The boy who once spent all his pocket money to buy me a bouquet of flowers for my birthday. The boy I loved more than anything in the world. Where did that boy disappear to? When did he turn into this cold, calculating man who would do anything for money? May? Theodosia touched my shoulder. Are you all right? No, I answered honestly. But I will be. I just need some time. Edgar, realizing that I needed to be with my friend, excused himself tactfully, promising to contact us as soon as he got the results of the pill analysis and gathered more evidence. When we were alone, Theodosia poured us both a glass of wine. To justice, she said, raising her glass. To truth, I replied. 3 days passed in tense anticipation. I stayed at Theodosia's house, not risking going back to my own place. We didn't know how desperate Rupert and Winifred would be if they suspected anything amiss. Edgar Finch called every evening, reporting on the progress of the investigation, and with each call the picture grew more grim. The pills Winifred had put in my container contained a strong sedative in a dosage that, if taken regularly, could cause serious heart rhythm disturbances, especially in a man of my age. Not lethal with a single dose, but with constant use. I preferred not to think about what could happen. Edgar had also discovered that Rupert had been meeting with a real estate agent in recent months, estimating the value of my house. He'd even signed a preliminary contract to sell it, a contract that would go into effect once he got custody of me. According to the documents Edgar had obtained, Rupert planned to have me declared incompetent the following month with the help of his accomplice, Dr. Harrison. They acted quickly and decisively, Edgar had said the last time we'd spoken. But careless, they left too many traces. Because they were sure of success, Theodosia said. They didn't expect May to reveal their plan. Exactly, the detective nodded. And that's their biggest mistake. On the fourth day, Edgar brought the last piece of evidence, audio recordings of Rupert and Dr. Harrison discussing the details of the plan to incapacitate me. Theodosia looked at all the material and nodded satisfied. This is more than enough for the prosecution. We can go to the police right now. No, I shook my head. I want to talk to them first. Face to face. May, Theodosia frowned. It could be dangerous. No more dangerous than what I've already been through, I said firmly. I want to see their faces when they realize they've lost. I want to hear their explanations, if there are any. I want to give them a chance, I stammered. A chance to repent before it's irreversible. Theodosia and Edgar looked at me, and I could see the doubt in their eyes. They thought I was driven by a naive hope of reconciliation. Maybe that was partly true, but mostly I needed to see Rupert's reaction in person to be sure that the son I'd known and loved was gone. All right, Theodosia said at last, but we'll do it on our terms, in a safe place, with guards and recording devices. No, I objected again. In my house, over dinner, I'll invite them over, tell them I've thought about their offer for Sun Valley, and I'm ready to sign all the necessary documents. I'll tell them I want to put the bulk of the assets in their name to avoid tax problems. It's too risky. Edgar shook his head. No more risky than inviting them to a strange place where they'd suspect something was wrong. I was adamant. They'll feel safer in my house, more relaxed, less cautious. Theodosia thought for a moment, tapping her fingers on the table. That makes sense, she admitted, but I insist on precautions. Edgar and I need to be in the house. The hidden cameras need to be working, and we need to have an emergency evacuation plan in case things get out of hand. I agreed to these conditions and we began to prepare for the crucial meeting. I called Rupert and invited him and Winifred to dinner on Friday. I told him I was feeling better. It was true. I had stopped taking the poison pills, that I had thought a lot about the future and was ready to accept their offer. I've decided you're right, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice low and unsure. I need help, and I want to discuss my financial affairs with you. It might be best to transfer most of my assets into your name now. That's a very wise decision, Mother. Rupert's voice was filled with ill-concealed triumph. Vinny and I will take care of everything. I don't doubt it, I said, and it was the truth. I went back to my house on Friday. It was a strange feeling, walking into your own home with the feeling that it might be dangerous. But Edgar and his assistant had already done a thorough inspection, making sure Rupert and Winifred hadn't set up any surprises during my absence. Theodosia helped me prepare dinner. Simple but elegant. Steaks, baked potatoes, fresh salad, and, of course, the wine and expensive red wine from Oswald's collection that I'd been saving for special occasions. This evening was definitely special. It was to put an end to a painful story of betrayal. Edgar checked all the cameras, set up additional microphones, and took a position in the office where he could watch the proceedings through a system of monitors. Theodosia was to join the dinner as an occasional guest who had stopped by to check papers and decided to stay. When all the preparations were completed, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me from there looked older than her 68 years. The last few weeks had not gone unnoticed, but there was a fire in her eyes that I hadn't seen there in a long time, a fire of determination and just anger. "You can do this, May," Theodosia said, coming up behind me and putting her hands on my shoulders. "You're stronger than you think." I squeezed her hand gratefully and nodded. "Yes, I can handle it. I have to." Rupert and Winifred arrived exactly at the appointed time, 7 o'clock in the evening. They were both dressed formally, he in a suit and tie, she in an elegant black dress and the pearl necklace I had once given her for her birthday. They brought a bottle of champagne, cheap, despite their increasing spending on luxury items for themselves. "Mom, you're looking better," Rupert remarked, kissing my cheek. "Yes, it's a good day," I replied, "although there are fewer and fewer of them." "All the more important that we talk," Winifred said with fake concern. "Decisions should be made while you're still in your right mind." I pretended not to notice that little jab and invited them into the living room. "Dinner is almost ready, but I'd like to talk business first. Have a seat." They settled on the couch, and I sat down in the chair across from them, feeling my heart beating faster and faster. The moment of truth was approaching. "I've been thinking about your proposal for a long time," I began, "about Sun Valley, about the transfer of assets, about all of it. And I've come to the conclusion that you're right, that I need help." Rupert and Winifred's faces lit up with identical smiles, predatory, triumphant. "That's so sensible, Mother," Rupert said. "You won't regret it. Sun Valley is a lovely place, and we'll visit you every week, and the money will be in good hands," Winifred added. "We'll see to it that they work efficiently." "I don't doubt that," I said, and something in my tone made them tense. "You're always very enterprising when it comes to money, especially my money." Rupert frowned, not sure what I was getting at. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "Your plans, of course," I smiled, feeling strangely calm. "About the very plans you discussed a few days ago. About how the useless old lady will go to her last sleep, and you will enjoy my money in Madrid." The blood rushed from their faces, both frozen like rabbits in headlights. "Yeah, I don't know what you mean." Rupert tried to save face, but his voice trembled. "No?" I leaned forward. "Then let me refresh your memory. You accidentally called me without me noticing, and I heard your entire conversation with Winifred about the drugs you were poisoning me with, about Dr. Harrison, who had to sign my incapacity papers, about Sun Valley, where you were going to put me before I went to my last sleep, about the trip to Madrid you'd already planned with the money you'd stolen from my accounts." With each word, their faces grew paler and paler. Winifred opened her mouth but couldn't utter a sound. Rupert froze like a statue, his fingers clenching and unclenching in a nervous tick. This, it's just a misunderstanding, he said at last. You misunderstood. We never. Please don't make it worse by lying. I shook my head. I have all the proof I need. Surveillance footage showing Winifred tampering with my medications. The results of the analysis of those medications, confirming that they contain life-threatening drugs. Audio recordings of your conversations with Dr. Harrison. Bank statements showing how you systematically stole money from my accounts. The pre-sale agreement for this house, which you signed without my knowledge, and of course the recording of your conversation about how you were planning my death. At that moment, Theodosia entered the living room, holding a folder of documents. All the documents are here, May. She nodded toward Rupert and Winifred. I see you've already started the conversation. What's going on here? Rupert jumped up, his face contorted with anger. What kind of a spectacle are you putting on? It's not an act, it's justice, I said calmly. Theodosia, please show them. She opened the folder and laid out on the coffee table the photographs, printouts, documents, all the evidence she'd collected over the last few days. Rupert and Winifred stared at them with growing horror. This is illegal, Winifred hissed. You had no right to spy on us. No more illegal than planning an assassination, Theodosia countered. And by the way, all the evidence is legally gathered and will be admissible in court. In court? Rupert turned even paler. You're going to sue us? Not me. I shook my head. The prosecutor's office, attempted murder, financial fraud, theft. These are felonies, Rupert. And there's more than enough evidence for a conviction. You won't do this, he tried to sound confident, but I could hear the fear in his voice. I'm your son. You wouldn't send me to prison. Wouldn't you send me to the grave? I asked quietly, looking him straight in the eye. He looked away, and that was more eloquent than any answer. But I didn't invite you here today to announce that you're going to the police, I continued. I came to tell you that your plans have failed, completely and utterly. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and placed it on the table. This is a copy of my new will. I completely changed it a week ago. All of my assets, including this house, all bank accounts and investments, are going into the administration of a specially created trust fund. The trust will support charities of my choice. To you, Rupert, I leave exactly $1, a symbolic amount that will prevent you from contesting the will on the grounds that I supposedly forgot about you. Winifred made a strange sound, something between laughter and sobbing. You can't do that, she exclaimed. It's Rupert's inheritance. He has a right. He has no right whatsoever, Theodosia retorted, especially after what you've planned to do. It's not fair. Rupert slammed his fist on the table, making the pictures and documents jump. You can't disinherit me. I'm your only son. The son who planned my death. I kept my composure, though my insides ached. The son who only saw me as a source of money. The son who stopped being my son the moment he decided my life was worth less than his wife's new kitchen or a vacation in Madrid. You're out of your mind, Rupert shouted, jumping up. No one will believe your nonsense. We'll prove that you're incompetent, that it's all a figment of your sick imagination. I don't think so, said Theodosia calmly. Mrs. Torquil underwent a full medical examination before signing the new will. 2 independent doctors confirmed her full capacity. The documents have been notarized with all legal formalities. There's no way to contest this will. Rupert looked like he'd been punched. He sank back onto the sofa, still not believing what was happening. But all these years, you thought you were going to get everything for nothing? I shook my head. Oswald always said that you have to earn your happiness, that you can't live at other people's expense, that it was important to be an honest, decent person. He'd be disappointed in you, Rupert, just as I was. Those words seemed to hurt him more than the threat of prison or the loss of his inheritance. Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, shame, perhaps even regret, but it lasted only a moment. Then his face contorted again with anger. "You'll regret this," he said through gritted teeth. "We'll sue. We'll tell everyone what you really are, a vindictive old woman out of her mind. No one will believe your accusations." "Please," I gestured to the evidence folder. "You can try, but be warned. If you decide to contest the will or otherwise continue this fight, all these materials will be sent to the police. And then it won't be about the inheritance. It'll be about jail time for both of you." Winifred, who until then had been tensely silent, suddenly burst into tears. "It was all him," she shouted, pointing at Rupert. "It was his idea. I was just following him. He said it was the only way to get the money, that you'd never give it up willingly." "Shut up," Rupert shouted, grabbing her arm. "Don't listen to her, Mother. She's always been a lying bitch." "Me?" Winifred wrenched her arm away. "It was all your idea. The pills, the doctors, the nursing home. Those were all your plans. I just wanted us to have a normal life, not to be in debt up to our necks because of your ambition." They kept yelling at each other, oblivious to my presence. All the grievances, all the resentments, all the mutual accusations, which must have been accumulated over the years, came out in this ugly scandal. The masks had finally fallen, revealing the true nature of their relationship, as fake and self-serving as their concern for me. I looked at them and felt neither anger nor triumph, but only weariness and sadness. They were strangers, not my son and his wife, but just two greedy, petty people who would do anything for money. "I think you'd better leave," I said, when their shouting had died down a little. "Now." "You can't just kick us out." Rupert jumped up again. "This conversation is not over." "On the contrary," Theodosia said firmly, rising, "it is more than over. I strongly advise you to leave the house at once, or we shall be forced to call the police. And don't forget," I added, looking them in the eye, "everything that happened here today is videotaped. If you try to take any action against me, those tapes will be made public. Think about your reputation, your career, your future." It was a strong argument, especially for Rupert, who always cared what others thought. He turned pale, realizing he was cornered. "Let's go, Vinnie," he said at last, grabbing her hand. "There's nothing more for us to do here." "But," she tried to object. "Come on." He practically dragged her out of the room. I didn't move as they walked past me toward the exit. I didn't follow them, didn't say goodbye, didn't say a word. I just watched them walk out of my house and out of my life. The front door slammed, the car engine roared, the sound of tires on gravel, and then silence. "Are you all right?" Theodosia asked quietly, sitting down next to me. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be, someday." Edgar came out of the office, holding a clipboard. "It's all written down," he said. "Every word, every gesture. If they try anything, we'll be ready." I nodded, feeling oddly numb. It was over. Rupert's plans ruined, my property protected, evidence gathered. I should have felt relief, triumph, maybe even joy. But instead, all I felt was emptiness and fatigue. "What now?" I asked, looking at Theodosia. "Now," she took my hand, "you start a new life. Without fear, without manipulation, without betrayal. A life on your own terms. A new life. At 68 years old. Without a son, without a family, with the realization that the man I loved more than anyone in the world wanted me dead. It seemed impossible, unreal, but there was truth in Theodosia's words. I had a chance that so many others in my position didn't have a chance to learn the truth, to defend myself, to start over, and I wasn't going to waste it. You're right. I straightened, feeling my resolve returning. A new life, my life. Edgar bowed out, promising to be in touch if necessary. Theodosia and I were left alone in a large, quiet house filled with the ghosts of the past. Do you want to come back to my place? She asked. You probably shouldn't stay here alone tonight. I wondered. This house held so many memories, good and bad. It had witnessed my happiness with Oswald, Rupert's childhood, and now the final act of betrayal. But it was my home, and I wasn't going to let fear or grief drive me from it. No, I said at last. I would stay. This is my home, and I won't let them take it away from me, physically or emotionally. Theodosia smiled approvingly. I thought you'd say that. Good, then I'll stay with you, at least for tonight. I squeezed her hand gratefully. Losing my son was painful, unbearably painful. But knowing that there were people there to support you in your darkest moments gave you the strength to move on. Thank you, Theo, I said, for everything. You're welcome, she smiled. That's what friends are for, isn't it? Yes, I thought, that's what real friends are for. And a real family, not one bound by blood, but one bound by love, respect, and loyalty. A family I'd lost in Rupert, but gained in Theodosia and others close to me. A new chapter of my life lay ahead. A chapter I would write on my own, without manipulation, without fear, without a shadow of betrayal. And despite the pain of loss, I was ready for this new chapter. It had been 6 months since the night I'd exposed Rupert and Winifred's plans. 6 months of a new life filled with change, challenges, and, to my surprise, a joy I hadn't expected to feel again. Of course, it hasn't been without its challenges. A week after our last meeting, I received a letter from Rupert's lawyer, a dry, formal notice that my son intended to contest the new will on the grounds of my alleged incapacity. Theodosia only grinned as she read it. Empty threats, she said, putting the letter aside. They don't stand a chance. We did everything by law, with independent medical experts and notarization. She turned out to be right. The first court hearing in the case ended in a complete fiasco for Rupert. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence presented, including doctors' reports and a videotape of the will signing, dismissed the lawsuit and sternly warned Rupert's lawyer about possible sanctions for unjustified prosecutions. But Rupert didn't give up. His next step was to try to smear me in the public eye. He began to spread rumors among my acquaintances that I was suffering from senile dementia, that I was being processed by fraudsters, that I was a victim of manipulation by Theodosia, who allegedly wanted to appropriate my fortune. These rumors reached my ears as well. Some friends stopped calling, others looked on with sympathy and distrust. Gossip in a small town spreads faster than wildfire, and soon I could feel the stares every time I went to the store or cafe. Don't pay attention, Theodosia advised. People always love a dramatic story. Soon there will be a new sensation, and they will forget about you. But it was hard for me to live in an atmosphere of suspicion and gossip. Besides, the house in Castle Rock, once my refuge, now seemed too big, too empty, too filled with the ghosts of the past. I woke up one morning with a firm decision I had to leave. To start with a clean slate in a place where no one knows my history, where there are no painful memories at every turn. I want to sell the house, I told Theodosia over a cup of coffee, and move. She didn't look surprised. I thought you'd never want to part with this house. I used to. I looked around at the walls that held so many memories. But now I realize that home is just walls. A real home is where you feel safe and secure. And here, There are too many ghosts here. So, where do you want to move to? I've been thinking. I didn't have a specific plan, just a desire to be away from Castle Rock and everything that came with it. Maybe Portland? I said finally. It's beautiful there. There's an ocean, lots of cultural activities, and it's far enough away from here. Theodosia nodded with understanding. Portland is a good choice, and I can visit you. It's only a couple hours away. Decision made, I acted quickly. I hired a realtor, put the house on the market, started getting rid of the things I didn't want to take with me to my new life. It was a strange but liberating process to decide what had real value to me and what was just taking up space, accumulating dust and memories. Among the old photo albums, I found snapshots of Rupert from infancy through college, a laughing baby with curly hair, a serious schoolboy with textbooks, a proud graduate in a gown. I stared at those pictures for a long time, trying to figure out exactly when the sweet boy I loved with all my heart turned into a man capable of planning my death for money. Was it my fault? Had I spoiled him too much, failing to teach him the value of hard work and respect for others? Or was Winifred's influence stronger than years of upbringing? Or maybe that dark side had always been in him, just well hidden until sufficient stimulus came along. I didn't know the answers to those questions, and in the end, they didn't matter anymore. What had been, had been. Now I had to look forward instead of looking back. I'd left most of the pictures in an old box I'd taken to the attic. Only one picture, Rupert at about 5 years old, smiling so wide that all his milk teeth were visible. I put in my purse, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a memory of a love that had once been real. The house sold surprisingly quickly. A young couple with 2 children moving from the city fell in love with the spacious rooms and manicured garden. Seeing their children running around on the lawn where Rupert once played, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and contentment. This house deserved to be a real family nest again, filled with love and laughter. In Portland, I bought a small but bright condominium apartment overlooking the ocean. It was modern, with no extra rooms or nooks and crannies, no creaking floorboards or leaky faucets, the exact opposite of my old Victorian house. And it was exactly what I needed, a space without memories, a blank canvas for a new life. The move proved physically exhausting, but emotionally liberating. Unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, choosing new curtains and carpets, I felt the weight of the past gradually lift off my shoulders. Every decision, every choice, from the color of the walls to the arrangement of the chairs, was mine alone, without the need to consider anyone else's opinion or taste. No one knew me in the new town. No one whispered behind me. No one looked at me with sympathy or suspicion. I was just Marian Torquil, an older lady who had recently moved from out of state. No stories, no dramas, no ghosts of the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Of course, there were moments of loneliness, evenings when I sat on the balcony looking out at the ocean and felt empty inside. Holidays that we used to celebrate as a family, but now I spent alone. Birthdays, my own and Rupert's, that passed without calls or congratulations. But I didn't allow myself to wallow in self-pity. Instead, I began to build a new social life. I enrolled in painting classes, a hobby I'd always loved but had neglected during marriage and motherhood. I joined a book club where I met interesting women my age. Many of them were also widows, some who had experienced divorce or estrangement from their children. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, walking dogs, caring for cats, helping with administrative work. Every day brought something new, new acquaintances, new impressions, new little joys. I learned to appreciate simple things, a good cup of coffee at dawn, a walk along the ocean, a warm scarf on a cool evening. I learned to live in the present, not the past or the future. Theodosia visited me once a month, always bringing me news from Castle Rock, which I listened to with less and less interest, and legal updates on Rupert's case, of which there were fewer and fewer. She became not just my lawyer, but a true friend, a reliable support in my new life. "You look happier," she remarked during one of her visits, watching me work on a new painting of a coastal landscape in sunset colors. "I do feel happier," I replied, keeping my eyes on the canvas. Who would have thought that at my age it would be possible to start over? "Age is just a number," she smiled. "It's what's inside that counts." And she was right. At 69, I felt more alive, more present than I had in years, without the weight of expectations, without the need to conform to other people's ideas, without the fear of disappointing or being disappointed. About a year after moving, I decided to fulfill a longtime dream of traveling around Europe. Not an organized tour with a group, but an independent trip, without a strict itinerary and schedule, with the opportunity to stay where I like and leave where I don't like. It was a bold decision for a woman of my age, and many new acquaintances expressed concern. Traveling alone, without knowledge of languages, without an escort. But I was determined. If not now, when? I spent 3 months traveling from country to country: Italy, France, Spain, Greece. I lived in small hotels and guest houses, ate in local restaurants, walked the narrow streets of ancient cities, enjoyed the art in museums, nature in national parks, the atmosphere in city squares. In Paris, I was sitting in a small cafe in Montmartre, drawing the street in front of me, when a gray-haired man with a friendly smile approached me. "Beautiful drawing," he said in lightly accented English. "Are you an artist?" "An amateur," I replied, smiling back. "I've always loved to draw, but I've only recently started doing it seriously." "It's never too late to follow your passion." He introduced himself as Henri, a former professor of art history, now retired. We spent the afternoon walking around Montmartre, discussing the Impressionists and modern art, sharing life stories. He showed me places not listed in the tourist guides, told me legends and anecdotes about the artists who lived here in the last century. In the evening, we had dinner at a small restaurant where he said they made the best fondue in Paris. It was one of the happiest days of my life, unexpected, spontaneous, filled with discoveries and human warmth. And there were many such days on the trip: chance encounters, unexpected adventures, moments of pure joy in simple things. Back in Portland, I felt like a different person, more open to the world, more confident, more ready for new experiences. My paintings changed, brighter, bolder, more expressive. My relationships with my new friends deepened. I was no longer afraid to share my thoughts and feelings, no longer afraid to be vulnerable. One sunny fall day, while going through the mail, I found a postcard with a view of Madrid, the Plaza Mayor, bathed in bright Spanish sunshine. On the back was a short inscription: "We are here after all. Without your money, but with a new understanding of life. Rupert and Winifred." I stared at that postcard for a long time, trying to figure out what I was feeling. Anger? No, it had long since subsided. Resentment? And it gradually faded away, dissolved into new experiences and joys. Longing for the son she lost? Perhaps, but it also became quieter, calmer, less acute. What did the card mean? An attempt at reconciliation? A demonstration of independence? A desire to show that they'd managed without me? Or perhaps a hidden admission of guilt? I couldn't know for sure, and in the end, it didn't matter anymore. Rupert had made his choice. I had made mine. Our paths had parted, perhaps forever. And while part of me would always love that little boy with the curly hair I remembered, the grown man he had become was no longer a part of my life. I walked over to the trash can and, after a moment's hesitation, tossed the card into it, not with anger or resentment, but with a quiet acceptance that some chapters in the book of life need to be closed so that new ones can be written. That evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset over the ocean. The colors of the sky, orange, pink, purple, reflected in the water, making it seem as if the whole world was embraced by a soft, warm light. A light breeze brought the smell of salt and seaweed, and seagulls cried in the distance. I thought about my life, the long years with Oswald, the joys and difficulties of motherhood, the bitterness of betrayal, the freedom I had found. I thought about how much had been packed into one human destiny, how many twists and turns, ups and downs, joys and sorrows. In losing my son, I found myself. By losing my past, I gained a future. In losing my illusions, I found the truth. And in that truth, as bitter as it was in the beginning, I eventually found peace and freedom. Tomorrow will be a new day. I'll go to my painting class. Then I'll meet up with my book club friends. In the evening, I might see a new movie at the theater or just read a good book. Just an ordinary day of an ordinary older woman living an ordinary life. But for me, every day like this is a precious gift. Every morning when I wake up in my new apartment, without fear, without anxiety, without a shadow of manipulation or betrayal, is a victory. Every moment when I make choices based only on my wants and needs, not on the expectations of others, is freedom. At 69, I have finally learned the most important thing of all, to be myself. Not a mother, not a wife, not a victim, but simply Marian Torquil, a woman with her own dreams, fears, weaknesses, and strength. A woman who had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged from it not broken, but reborn. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the last glimmers of light in the sky. I finished my tea, gathered my sketchbook and pencils, and returned to the apartment. Tomorrow would be a new day, new impressions, new little joys and challenges, and I was ready to meet them with an open heart and a clear mind. Rupert and Winifred were in the past, like a painful but necessary lesson. They chose their path, I chose mine, and though my path was lonely, it was my own, and I walked it with the dignity and quiet confidence of a man who was finally at peace with himself. The postcard from Madrid lay in the trash, a symbol of the final farewell to the past. Tomorrow it would be taken away with the rest of the garbage, and even the memory of it would be gradually erased, dissolved in the flow of new impressions and emotions. Life went on, my life, on my terms, and that was the most important achievement, the most significant victory in the long and complicated story called Marian Torquil's life.